Hey folks, we're brought to you today by Squarespace, the easiest way to create a beautiful website, blog, or online store for you and your ideas. Squarespace features an elegant interface, beautiful templates, and truly incredible 24/7 customer support. We run harrisfootball.com on Squarespace. You should try it at squarespace.com and enter offer code Harris at checkout to get 10% off. Squarespace, build it beautiful. Now let's get to the show.
It's the Harris Football Podcast with your host, Christopher Harris.
Welcome. Yeah, welcome in. Hey, I am Chris Harris, and that is convenient because this is the Harris Football Podcast. Thank you very much for listening to the little podcast that could. Thanks to Paul K. for a fun Skype session. Paul won one of our trivia contests during our live streaming video Q&As, and his prize, such as it was a one-on-one conversation with me. I suppose you personally will have to judge whether that qualifies as a prize. But Paul seemed to enjoy it, and I definitely did too. And if you want a chance to win, tune in to our Film Don't Lie live streaming video session Thursday night, 1 hour before kickoff of Colts-Texans. Go to harrisfootball.com/videos for more information. And don't worry, if you win trivia and don't want a face-to-face conversation with me, we can come up with a different prize.
Today's kickoff.
Well, it's Wednesday, and so that means it's Ranks Day. My Week 5 ranks are currently live on harrisfootball.com, and we'll spend a large part of today's show talking about the ranks. First, I will synthesize some of your questions and feedback and are you crazies to find the pressure points of this week for ranks. And remember, we've got 4 teams on bye, the Jets, Dolphins, Vikings, and Panthers. We'll have another one of your listener-generated songs. This time, it's based on a Chameleonaire song. We'll have a voicemail, which we haven't done in a little while, but when Devontae Morgan Freeman calls Sunk by a Hug, you gotta listen. And then Patrick Daugherty of Rotoworld will come aboard. Pat makes Rotoworld's weekly ranks, so we'll do a little comparison shopping between our 2 Week 5 sets of ranks. We're brought to you today by SeatGeek, the best way to get tickets for any sporting event, including this week when you can find seats for Patriots Cowboys or maybe the Red River Shootout, though my poor Texas Longhorns don't figure to be a match for the Sooners this year. Anyway, SeatGeek does things that other online ticketing sites can't and don't. It pulls in ticket options from hundreds of online sellers, so when you shop on SeatGeek, you're seeing virtually every ticket option available for that game all on one page. They have this cool thing that I've talked about before called Deal Score. It really makes a difference. It ranks every ticket on the market with a 1 to 100 value score. You can easily identify the best ticket values in the building. And SeatGeek's mobile app makes the ticket buying process seamless and easy. Once you find a ticket, 2 taps, it's yours. So download the free SeatGeek app right now. I've got it on my phone. Inside the app, enter the promo code Harris. I entered the promo code Harris, and you'll get $20 off your first purchase. Every ticket purchased on SeatGeek is backed by a 100% guarantee, so download the free SeatGeek app and enter promo code Harris.
Injury news.
So let's clean up some of the injury questions for Week 5. As always, there are several players that, when you're ranking on a Tuesday afternoon, you're kind of just guessing about their status. But actually, one guy we know will miss Week 5, at least, is Steve Smith, who has broken bones in his back. So you're left with the question of whether any of the remaining Ravens receivers can be useful in Smitty's absence, because we know there could be a lot of targets available. I ranked Kamar Aiken highest among the remainders, but he's only 42nd for me on the receiver list. he filled in pretty well last Thursday once Smith was out. Feels like, though, in any given week, any of these guys could be the targeted one, including Marlon Brown, and they just acquired Chris Givens, who came over from the Rams. Like I said, I guess Aiken is the lottery ticket I'd be most likely to scratch here, but the range of possible outcomes just seems very wide. LaShawn McCoy isn't officially ruled out, but nobody expects him to play in Week 5 and maybe several weeks after that. So the real question is Carlos Williams going to play? So Pat Daugherty and I are going to talk about the Bills' backfield later. For the moment, seeing the Bills sign Boom Herron makes me think they're preparing not to have Williams, who is in the NFL's concussion protocol. I ranked Anthony Dixon highest at 26th among running backs, and Herron is 48th for me, but obviously I'm guessing at usage. I also, for the moment, assumed Sammy Watkins would sit with his calf injury again, but that could change later in the week. Stevie Johnson has a hamstring problem. There was really no news as of Tuesday, so I took a wild shot and suggested he might sit out. So I ranked Dontrell Inman, though I didn't rank him where I'd normally have Stevie. Malcolm Floyd has a concussion and could sit too for the Chargers. If Stevie winds up being able to go, he would probably slot in for me, mid-30s among receivers. Deshaun Jackson, not getting fooled again. He's not on my list. And I also left off his teammate Jordan Reed, who suffered a concussion and apparently a knee sprain in Week 4. So if you had Reed's over-under at 5 games and took the under, you won. Derek Carrier figures to be his fill-in, and I ranked him 14th among tight ends. Not because I have a ton of faith, but because I look at the list of tight ends and I'm like, I guess I'll take the upside chance on Carrier rather than suffer through another week of Jared Cook. I also didn't rank Eric Ebron, though his knee injury isn't presumed structural. I wouldn't feel good about using him this week or really trying his presumed replacement, Tim Wright. I did rank Andrew Luck in advance of Thursday night's game, though we were blindsided by him on Sunday, so we could be blindsided by him again Thursday. And if we are, the Colts' weapons all get downgraded. I also ranked Andre Ellington, but I put him substantially behind Chris Johnson, who I think eventually will turn into a pumpkin, but for the moment I'll leave him as the Cardinals starter. I ranked Marshawn Lynch, but we'll see. I put Tevin Coleman back in there, but we don't know that for sure, and certainly Devontae Freeman has earned some rope. Alshon Jeffrey is in there for me. Dwayne Allen figures to play Thursday night, and I ranked Crockett Gilmore, but it's not certain he'll be ready. We're also sponsored today by DraftKings, and there's no question it's an interesting time for the daily fantasy sports industry. But I'm still mighty bullish on DraftKings, and on DFS in general. Sunshine is the best deodorant. I know people I know at DraftKings are in it for the long haul, and they're looking to create trust that their games are completely on the level. I talked about this at length at the beginning of Tuesday's show, but I want to tell you that while I understand I'm not there in their building, and I don't have direct firsthand knowledge, I have a high degree of trust in my friends at DraftKings, and I will be playing there this weekend for sure, and doing it with a bunch of you, all in our Harris Football Listener League. The bottom line here is there's a reason DraftKings is the number one daily fantasy sports site in the world. There's a reason why so many of us play, and it gets so much publicity, and people are so invested in, understanding what's happening, and that's because it's a great product. It's incredibly fun, and people are discovering DraftKings just like they discovered commissioner-style fantasy football a decade ago. I'm still a big believer. These are growing pains of a viable, long-term concern that creates awesome entertainment and fun and a way for you to win real cash. And DraftKings is so confident you'll enjoy playing, they'll give you a free contest when you go to DraftKings.com and use my promo code Harris. So I do hope you'll give it a shot. I will be there this weekend. It's DraftKings.com, promo code Harris.
It's time for Rankings Talk.
All right, so let's talk about some of the hot-button players in the Week 5 ranks. I asked you all to take a look at my ranks on harrisfootball.com and tweet your questions to me at harrisfootball. And I grouped the most common players you asked about. Let's talk about a few of them. Hopefully will be useful for lots of teams. The number one player you asked about, and I kind of can't believe I'm saying this, is Owen Daniels. Owen Daniels. And I mean, I get it. It's not because you all think that Owen Daniels is awesome at football or that Peyton Manning even necessarily throws it to him very much, considering Daniels has 12 catches in 4 games. Y'all are mad at me because Daniels plays against a Raiders defense that's been super generous to tight ends so far this year. And this brings up 2 things. First of all, the Harris Index is live. If you go to harrisfootball.com/Harris Index, you'll see Week 5's index, which is a schedule independent matchup tool. Does some math and tells you who's been the best and worst defensive matchups for each of the positions. There's a longer explanation of what exactly it does on the page. And you'll see, indeed, that the Raiders have been brutal against tight ends. But here's a dirty secret of mine. I do the Harris Index for tight ends. I don't necessarily believe it. My experience has taught me that tight ends don't tend to be particularly matchup sensitive in the long haul. And that's because it's a weird position. Different teams employ tight ends in really different ways. You know, some line them out wide or in the slot. Some run them into pass patterns from inline, from the backfield. My contention is also that tight end is one of the easier positions in the league for a defense to scheme against. I'll be the first one to admit that the Raiders haven't exactly done this yet, and you can, if you want to, draw a line between the problems that Oakland is having at safety and the statistical trouble they're having stopping the Gary Barnages of the world. But, you know, this is a personal philosophy thing. When it comes to tight end, I just don't look at matchups nearly as much as many of you obviously do. And I admit, as is the case with most philosophical issues, you know, probably nobody's entirely right. I just mentioned how ugly the tight end position is. I just put Derek Carrier ahead of Owen Daniels, and if that sort of turns your stomach and you just want to say, you know, I see how ugly the position is, I may as well just stream Daniels because nobody else in his neighborhood on the list is any good, I'm fine with that. But seeing him play so far, I've been really unimpressed with his role and Virgil Green being there and sort of doesn't seem open all that much. And my guess, and it's just a guess, is that this is where the tight end streak against Oakland may stop. Frank Gore is someone else many of you were upset about. How can I have Gore as high as number 6 among running backs? He's losing fumbles near the goal line. He's driving me crazy. I must say a few of you seemed personally offended at this rank, which I guess I can understand if you feel burned by this particular gentleman. Again, have you seen the running back list? I feel like I'm saying this every week, but if you get out a piece of paper and a pencil and start ranking running backs yourself, you figure out where you get Frank Gore. I mean, it gets bad really fast, especially with a few good running backs on bye. The Texans certainly haven't been a bad matchup for opposing backs. Josh Robinson was benched for fumbling. I'm expecting a big old workload for Gore Thursday night. I'll run him right back out there. Though, as I said, if luck sits, I'll be lowering that rank by several spots. Carlos Hyde. Oh, cousin Josh is winning you over, apparently. Don't I know how good the Giants are, how stacked the box will be? Okay, so week 4 was a stinker, statistically. The most alarming part of it for Hyde, 8 carries. You can't have that, no question. You know, if the 49ers can't figure out their game plan or their game flow to the point where they're going to give Hyde well into double-digit touchdowns Sunday night or in any game, my ranking of Hyde as a clear number 2 fantasy back will look really bad. The Giants have been legitimately and, to me, surprisingly good against the run. But for me, this is about Hyde as a centerpiece of that offense. even though he wasn't last week, and that was a big mistake. I look at the other guys around him on my running back list, especially some of the players below him on my list, and I see a bunch of platoon backs. Guys who, if Hyde's workload felt shaky last week, I mean, these other players have major workload uncertainty every single week. So I made the decision to stick with talent over matchup because I do think Hyde is really, really talented. Again, personal philosophy. If your instinct is to say, yeah, no, I don't want to run a bad offense out there against what I think is a potentially very good defense, it's cool with me. I have no quarrel. I get the argument. And I figured I could touch on a couple asked about receivers, but rather than for week 5, a few of you asked about rest of the season ranks for Larry Fitzgerald and Jordan Matthews, and I could talk about them for the rest of the season. So right now I have Matthews 25th and Fitzgerald 36th. That's for my standard rest of the season ranks, which you can find on harrisfootball.com. PPR, I have Matthews 23rd and Fitz 29th. So a few people took issue with both guys, and then a couple people asked, why do I have so much faith in Matthews? Why do I have so little faith in Fitzgerald? A top 30 rank doesn't feel like so little faith, but he's been good so far. So when it comes to Matthews, I know things have slowed down the past 2 weeks. I have to remember what it was like after those first 2 games to begin the season. I also know that on tape, Matthews has some hands problems, and hands problems may not go away. To me, though, he's been the one constant, and I think it's a mistake to say the offense can't get fixed at all. I think they'll figure some things out going forward. And Matthews has been between 7 and 13 targets every game. I think he has yet to really rear his head as a red zone guy. I think he will. For me, he's someone that I would feel pretty good about targeting in trades. I think there's better stuff ahead. And, if the Matthews owner in your league is feeling shaky on him, I would be willing to give something. I'm not going to give Adrian Peterson for him, but I would be willing to give, a little something. Fitzgerald. He's been a terrific story so far. It's not like my rank is so low that I'm predicting that he's going to fall off a cliff. Matt Waldman came on Monday's show, and we talked about the Cardinals-Rams tape, and we kind of independently came up with the same conclusion. We left with the impression that getting John Brown going was job one for Bruce Arians in that game. We saw a different kind of usage for Smokey, fewer random deep shots, though, by the way, we'll still take the deep shots here and there. We like those long touchdowns. But more in that game, we saw the slants and the posts and the quick hits to get the ball in Brown's hands to get him rolling downfield. So I do have Fitz ahead of Brown in my rest of the season ranks among Cardinals receivers, but I think we're going to see better balance between those two. And that's why Fitzgerald maybe isn't as high as some of you wish he was, and you get upset that he's not. All I can do is tell you my logic, and there it is.
Time for the mailbag.
This is Daugherty Morgan Freeman. I bought 2 pairs of Martin Bow jeans, one for when I'm feeling regular, and another for when I'm watching the Miami Dolphins offense, and I'm feeling constipated.
Thank you for the update, Devontae Morgan Freeman. I think we all are super interested to hear about your movie star bowels and which Mott and Bow jeans are most appropriate for which circumstances.
Harris's music digression.
This is a fun one. It's a little a cappella number from a fellow who only identified himself as Travis is my name. I'd love to give you credit when you submit these, so tell me who you are and where you're writing from if you want to. You can send your songs to heyharris@harrisfootball.com. Anyway, as I mentioned earlier, this is a tribute to Chameleonaire and also a tribute to that person in your league who just won't stop making you trade offers they know you won't possibly accept.
Team is stacked now. We're running. I'm hoping that you'll stop trying to trade for Gurley. Stop trying to trade for Gurley. Stop trying to trade for Gurley. I don't want Gordon or Ingram. So please just stop trying to trade for Gurley. Stop trying to trade for Gurley. Stop trying to trade for Gurley. It might be open, but only if you're willing to give up Adrian Peterson. Stop trying to trade for Gurley. Stop trying to trade for Gurley.
Today's guest.
And today's guest, it's a great one from Rotoworld. It's Pat Daugherty. You can find him on Twitter at RotoPat. He's a great follow, and although he expresses a bit of trepidation about your Twitter name, don't you, Pat?
Yeah, I mean, so my real name, Patrick Daugherty, is so many characters that I think it can't even fit in a Twitter handle, so I don't even think I had a choice to use it, so I had to condense, and I wanted something short, I wanted something sort of snappy, and somehow, I think I was debating between RotoPat and Pat Roto. Pat Roto probably would have been a million times worse.
Yes.
RotoPat sticks with people, but I feel like it's really corny. But most of my friends tell me they like it, and
I like it.
I'm trying to get over it. To me, I don't know. I've been really self-conscious about it for 5 years now, but I'm probably to the point where I should just embrace it.
I think you should embrace it. I think it's memorable and good. So this is our rank show, and I've spent about half an hour haranguing people about some of the rank issues that people have addressed to me on Twitter for week 5. And so I thought I would have you on, and we would talk about, some similarities, some differences, some issues in our respective ranks, though I do want to emphasize that as we talk, we're talking on Wednesday morning, and Pat, you were saying that, what I was looking at are preliminary ranks, so people shouldn't get, they're super upset about what they hear.
Yeah, Wednesday's bunker day for me. Wednesday's the day where I wake up, I drink my cup of coffee, and then immediately try to spend way too much time working on the ranks. So I've got this is a representative shell, but yeah, by tonight they'll be completely different. But it's not like I'm going to be, dropping guys 30 spots and raising guys 30 spots. So it's representative enough.
There you go. So even if I say something is, Pat had him at number blah, and he doesn't wind up having him that way on Rotoworld, you guys aren't allowed to get mad at him.
Please no calls.
And we will be giving out Pat's phone number at the end of the segment, just in case you need to get in touch with him. All right, so let's just start talking about some dudes. And I wanted to start out with Todd Gurley, who is going to be such an interesting story here going forward, such a breakout against the Cardinals. I have him 15th among running backs, and as I was devising my ranks on Tuesday afternoon, I was chuckling to myself and rubbing my hands together and going, oh, I'm really shaking things up having him this high. And then I released the ranks, and I started to get tweets like, why are you so low on Todd Gurley?
What did Todd Gurley's family mean? Is this some old Montague and Capulet feud here between the Harrises and the Gurleys? This is ridiculous.
And the funny thing is, I don't really ever look at other folks' ranks, certainly not as I'm making them. And then, of course, you sent me your preliminary ranks, and you had him 8th. Now, whatever, 15th, 8th, we're both saying, we strongly think about starting Todd Gurley this week, but maybe you could tell us how you started to think about approaching ranking him this week.
I mean, to me, first starting off at 8 is almost a challenge to myself. It's almost so running back, it's just been such a mess this year. But you can't even really say there's been 5 top guys. It's more been Le'Veon's been good since he's been back. Jamal's been pretty consistent, and Matt Forte has been pretty consistent. Adrian Peterson's been pretty consistent, but beyond that, it's every week it's is Joseph Randle going to be the number 5 running back? Last week, Ronnie Hillman was a 72-yard. I just feel there's no clarity whatsoever. So to me, putting Gurley so high initially was almost okay, this guy's coming off one of the best games by any running back all year. I should probably try to find reasons to like him as opposed to reasons not to like him. But I don't know, I'm already starting to ramble here. But to me, it's my thought process for last week was the Rams aren't getting offense from Nick Foles. They're not getting offense from Trey Mason. They basically have bet their entire season on Todd Gurley kind of being a centerpiece type offensive talent. They have to have him do something. And then he did do it last Sunday, and it's almost I thought it was the guy they had to ride. They rode him last week. I don't really see what their other choice is, but I don't even know if they wanted to get him 20 touches last week. It was probably pretty aggressive for a second career appearance, and I've kind of lost my point here, but I just feel they need him so badly very few teams are riding the running back. It's just becoming less and less common. I feel like the Rams have to run him, and he's just got like a really high touch floor, in my opinion. And yeah, that's that. I don't know. Make of that what you
Well, my logic of having him just a little bit lower, even though I thought I was being so aggressive and cool and hip and, now, for somebody my age, this is hip and now, 15 for Todd Gurley. I feel a little bit capped in that I don't know exactly what their plans are. Because like you said, the first half he got stuffed and they didn't use him a ton. And then, a lot of the yardage turned out to be on that last drive, which was very important because it ran out the clock. But, it's some like feast or famine type defense for Arizona where they're trying to stuff him. And if they don't, he's going to break for 50 yards. And he did. I guess I want to see it one more week before I consider him a top 10. But I mean, I've been saying all summer, anybody who listened to the show says, I haven't liked a prospect this much since Adrian Peterson. You should trade for him now. I really believed. Go ahead.
I was just saying, you're definitely right. I mean, I think he got like 130 of his carries 130 of his yards on like 5 carries.
Right.
So he could definitely be boom or bust. And yeah, I might eventually lower him out of the top 10. I think for sure I'll have him in the top 12.
Yeah, I mean, it's an ugly position. I've been saying it all show and all season. Preliminarily, I keep emphasizing, you ranked Carlos Williams, and I didn't. Whatever. It's a concussion. We don't know whether he's going to play. If for the moment, I could just tell you, all right, Carlos Williams is going to be ruled out. How would you handle ranking what's left in Buffalo, be it, Anthony Dixon or Boom Herron or Sierra Wood? How would you come down, and would anybody feel like an okay start to you?
I think it'd be one of those situations where it's like Boobie Dixon's like barely inside the top 30, and the thought process is basically pray for a touchdown from Boobie Dixon and kind of, not a recommended play. So LaShawn McCoy got hurt. Carlos Williams was a guy you felt like you had to force into your lineup. Now when they're both hurt, obviously there's really no one like that in that backfield, kind of more of like a bleak committee. And I'd probably do Anthony Dixon. So yeah, top 30 Anthony Dixon, just hoping for a touchdown, which everyone knows is a terrible strategy. And then probably Boom Herron over Sierra Wood, but that could be kind of silly, but he's just such a good pass catcher. I could maybe see him sliding into more of a role than Sierra Wood. But yeah, I mean, obviously not a situation I'd be very thrilled about.
Yep. I have Dixon at 26 among running backs with no Carlos Williams in there, so I think we're exactly on the same page about how we would rank them. Every week I have someone come on and talk about ranks, and every week we inevitably, eventually, as inexorably as the Grim Reaper, get diverted into DeMarco Murray.
Yeah.
You have him 20th in your preliminary ranks. I have him 32nd. And my rank is not so low because I have Ryan Matthews ranked higher. I don't. I basically just kind of flummoxed by the offensive line in Philly, and I can't abide. But I wonder if maybe I've gone overboard by essentially urging fantasy owners to not use any of the Eagles running backs this week.
I mean, I don't know. I'm starting to kind of feel like I'm like DeMarco Murray's like Baghdad Bob. Like, everything is great here, guys. Like, there's been a few setbacks, but the overall situation is still great. We're still very confident. Yeah, to me, part of it's almost like the squeaky wheel theory, which isn't a real theory, obviously. But DeMarco Murray complained about his role. Chip Kelly said he's probably right to complain about his role. But like you said, there's the offensive line. Now there's even Lane Johnson's playing through like 3 sprains. But part of it is, they need him. Just like a lot of these teams need him to start doing something, and they don't seem to really trust Ryan Matthews. In the past 2 games where Murray's been active, I mean, Matthews only has 6 total touches. Yeah, he kind of stabilized the running game in the game that Murray missed, but he wasn't like, it wasn't some like huge day. He averaged like 4.2 yards per carry, and he's just, I'm falling back. These probably aren't really good reasons to have someone ranked high because performance matters the most, but he's making so much money. They clearly want him to be the guy, and they need him to be the guy. And it's still only week 5, so I'm especially because it's not like there's like a bunch of great options behind him. It's like, do I really want to bench a guy I took early in the 2nd round in week 5 for Danny Woodhead or Ronnie Hillman? So that's kind of my thinking behind it, but I don't really have any like great silver bullet points to make about it.
Yeah, well, statistically, you're not going to find him, and unfortunately, tape, you're not going to find him either. And for me, this feels like a case where I would let everyone rest and try someone else, but I get it. Let me ask you this. Given the Baghdad Bob, I love that, nature of your endorsement of DeMarco Murray, would you feel as though he's still a buy low? We talked about that yesterday on the podcast, and we kind of came down. Jim McCormick and I came down on the side. I mean, he's an Eagles fan, but we came down on the side of yes, like really low. You need to buy him really low, but if you can get him for Leonard Hankerson, do it.
Yeah, I was going to say Leonard Hankerson. I mean, you can never underestimate fantasy owners' frustration. I mean, people get so wound up so quickly that I almost feel like, yeah, you could get them for someone crazy like Michael Crabtree or Leonard Hankerson or like some other like RB, maybe even like someone who likes shiny objects. Offer Ronnie Hillman. I don't know.
Danny Woodhead, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, buy low and sell high are kind of concepts that get debated more than executed in the real world fantasy. But yeah, just in like my quote unquote home leagues, people get frustrated so quickly where I think you could probably still get him for something that's worth it. I mean, maybe Michael Crabtree will outproduce DeMarco Murray the rest of the season, but I feel like that would be a risk worth taking.
Yeah, me too, and Jim and I said the same thing yesterday, and I'll repeat this just in case folks didn't listen to Tuesday's show, but like there's something to be said for acquiring a player like Murray really cheap. Like the person who drafted him feels obligated to start him. If you acquire him cheap, you can rest him. You can just see because you're not giving up enough to feel like you're obligated to start him. So let's move on to receivers, and I couldn't come up with huge debate points here. Alshon Jeffrey, I'm a little higher on. T.Y. Hilton, you're a little higher on, but it's close enough where it's like rather than find fake points of debate, which is the purview of the place where I just used to work, I thought I would ask you about the process of finding landing spots for a couple of receivers, and they were asked about a lot. Martavis Bryant is one of them, and one of my Twitter followers, David Legeri, said that, hey, Martavis Bryant is ahead of some hot PPR guys like Hankerson and Crabtree and Hearns and Harvin. David was a little vexed by this. I had a hard time ranking him. He's talented, but it's Mike Vick. He's been off for a month. We both have him sort of mid-20s. How did you work on finding a landing spot for Martavis Bryant?
Yeah, to me, it was kind of similar to Todd Gurley. It was almost like, at first, I'll try to find reasons to be high on this guy who I absolutely loved and who absolutely dominated last year. But 26 is where I have him right now. It's probably a little aggressive, but I think I've seen just about every Steelers game this year, and I feel like I've seen 8 or 9 drives that are going perfectly fine until they get into the red zone, and then it just completely stalls out, which was pretty similar to what was happening last year where they featured Martavis Bryant. And I think he just might be a guy, even with Michael Vick, like you said, that really kind of puts a damper on things. But I think he just might be really a guy where they try to get him going early. I mean, Marcus Wheaton is falling flat on his face again. I highly doubt they want Darius Hayward-Bay to be a thing. And this week's matchup, the Chargers are pretty banged up at cornerback, and Jason Verrett, however you pronounce the last name, is still dealing with a foot injury. Brandon Flowers is concussed. So, Martavis Bryant for last year, he doesn't really need like a ton of targets to make a huge impact. He can go like 340 with a touchdown on like 6 or 7 targets. So he's a guy where, as opposed to being pessimistic, I'll probably try to find reasons to like him. But yeah, I mean, could also be overly aggressive.
I'm almost exactly the same spot, and I have a lot of the same logic points. And to be honest, if Big Ben were in there, I mean, we'd be talking about top 15. So
yeah.
I think it's a high upside, scary downside sort of play. And in a PPR, I still kind of feel the same way. I realize it's not going to be a ton of catches, but I still feel like I'm with you. It's the Darius Hayward-Bay touches that he'll get, and Hayward-Bay gets a lot of touches this month. How about Brandon Cooks? We both put him right in that same neighborhood around Bryant, but obviously stat-wise he's struggling. He was a potential bust of mine this summer. Many listeners tweeted questions about him, including Paul Arthur Nelson, who said he's happy to see Cooks ranked ahead of some of the free agent wide receivers in his league, but if he puts up another stinker, would you be opposed to dropping him? What are your thoughts about using Cooks?
So say Paul Arthur Nelson, by the way, that sounds like an early 20th century vice presidential candidate or something.
He lost, though.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, he's on the William Jennings Bryan ticket. But Cooks is almost a guy where I feel like I'm almost making excuses for him at this point. Where I have him the mid-20s feels kind of generous for him. You know, I think he's the number 51 overall receiver through 4 weeks. He hasn't topped 79 yards in a game. He hasn't topped 8 targets in a game. And yeah, the playmaking ability is there somewhere supposedly, but Drew Brees is having trouble helping guys make plays this year, and he might be one of those guys where it's just time for a total reset on his value, and maybe he's more of like a wide receiver 3 in PPR leagues, but in standard, might be time to start considering kind of a wide receiver 4 guy that you're only playing when you got a guy on bye. So I think he's got just enough of like a target floor where I don't think it's insane to put him in the 20s, but he's kind of living on borrowed time there, and if he doesn't do it this week, I'd be shocked if I had him in the top 30 next week.
So the answer to Paul's question, I think, is no. I think if it would not be crazy to drop him if he doesn't produce this week. It's sort of a big week for him in your mind. Yeah,
it's a really big week. I don't know. I never like determining a guy's status coming down to 1 week. Like if he doesn't do it this Sunday, but I'd say more put him on your bench than drop him. Just he's still he hasn't received more than 8 targets, but he's still averaging about 8 targets. That's kind of hard to find on the waiver wire, but yeah, just don't feel married to starting him, maybe is how I'd put it.
So lastly, I'll get to the single most tweeted about player in all of football this week for me once my ranks came out, and that's Owen Daniels. I have him 20th, you have him 12th. I don't even think 12th would be high enough to satisfy Harris Football Nation. Tweeters are very upset that I seemed unaware of the fact that the Raiders struggled to stop tight ends so much. I said this earlier in the show. I had my say, my contention that failure to cover tight ends is kind of nonsense. That defenses can scheme away tight ends if they want to. I don't give matchups against tight ends very much weight. But what say you on this issue of thunderous importance?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I'm thrilled about having Owen Daniels 12th. And especially after 4 weeks, kind of like what you said, I mean, teams, quote unquote, stopping or not stopping tight ends can be kind of fluky. I mean, we're talking about a month of action. But that being said, I'll kind of dismiss my own point. And they're allowing the Raiders are allowing 18.7 fantasy points per game to tight ends right now, which is 5 more than the Giants, who are number 2. So that's kind of compelling to me, and I don't know, he's got touchdowns in back-to-back games, but for me it's just mostly about, it's not like I'm not pumping him up necessarily because of his positives, but I'm looking at the guys around him this week and maybe just liking his positives a little more. I mean, it's around Owen Daniels, it's kind of like, it's the San Diego tandem where we really have no idea how things will unfold with Ladarius Green and Antonio Gates. You got Gary Barnidge, who I know is headed to the Hall of Fame, but just not sure I'm ready to believe in him yet. You've got Jared Cook, who's one of my least favorite players in the NFL. You've got Zach Ertz, who hasn't done much. You've got Heath Miller with Michael Vick. Who really knows what to expect there? And then you got Eric Ebron, who's hurt. So
you got Derek Carrier, my man.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I'm not like thrilled about it, but to me, I guess I can kind of see the pro Owen Daniels movement's points this week where he's got enough things working in his favor where I'll consider him at least on the tight end 1 fringe.
Well, I think Harris Football Nation is officially more of a Roto Pat fan than they are of a Harris Football fan because, boy, did I get a lot of flack. But we'll see. I mean, I am not sold on the 12 catches in 4 games. I'm not sold, but we will find out whether Peyton Manning has decided that that's his not-so-secret weapon this week.
But isn't that one of the most interesting parts about rankings? So I go live on early Thursday afternoons, and there'll be like 4 or 5 big names I'm really nervous about. Like gosh, are people going to think I have Arian Foster too low? And then just like immediately, like the first 4 tweets at me, you'll be like, why don't you have the Jaguars defense higher? And just some, lower play you haven't really given any thought to, and you're like, wow, people are really serious about that. I guess maybe I need to reconsider my position on the Jaguars defense. So,
well, see, you're a good guy who wants to consider other people's opinions. I just dig in. Instead, I go on 5-minute diatribes on my podcast about how I'm right and everybody else in the world is dumb.
I think if I had a podcast, I'm actually a pretty pro ranting. I rant on Twitter too. I'm not going to pretend I don't rant on Twitter. If I had my own podcast, I think maybe I would come much more to that side. I just spend 50% of my life ranting.
I am very unreasonable, just as a personality in general. I'm quite unreasonable. Hey, Pat Daugherty, you are a great guest, and I know we had to work some logistics to get you on because, man, are you a busy fella. You are the heartbeat and the lifeblood of Rotoworld, along with our buddy Evan Silva. But I appreciate you being on. It was so fun to be able to talk, and we are two of the people who've been doing this ranking stuff for a really long time, so it's really fun to connect.
Yeah, this is my third year doing rankings. That's like 2 centuries in fantasy football time. So yeah.
So in other words, let's see. By my math, I've been doing it like 10 centuries.
You've been doing it since like the Middle Ages. Yeah. So yeah, you're like you really know what you're doing.
Oh yeah, heaven knows. Pat, thanks for being on. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you very much. My pleasure.
And that's our show. There at the end, I should have repeated that you can follow Patrick Daugherty on Twitter @RotoPat, and please do. He's one of the main ranking voices in the entire fantasy industry. We were psyched to have him on. Thank you very much for listening. On tomorrow's program, we'll have some flexual healing, so make sure to tweet me your flex questions @Harris Football, and I'll compile the most frequently asked ones and help you make your tough lineup calls. And of course, Thursday night, be ready to ask me questions before Colts-Texans live streaming video on Film Don't Lie. It'll be great fun. Thanks again. I don't know if I take enough time out of the show on a regular basis to express my gratitude to all of you for helping make the little podcast that could so wildly successful. It's crazy. I mean, 2 months ago, this thing didn't exist, and now it's a way for all of us to connect over something as goofy as fantasy football. I can never fully repay all of you, but I promise to try my best. Thanks again, and I'll talk to you tomorrow.
The Harris Football Podcast's opening theme is Under the Gun by Apex Manor. The end theme is Tooth and Claw by OU Villain. Subscribe to the Harris Football Podcast on iTunes and never miss an episode.